welcome, Bob. We're back for another space between, another technical hitch. So we're a little bit shaken, but we'll ground ourselves and get back into that. And we'll let the whole world know we're not using StreamYard anymore. We'll stick with the old faithful Zoom until we come up with something better. And yeah, so here I am again with my good friend Bob, my recovery buddy and journey companion around my part of my spiritual journey, at least. Yeah, and we're picking up from last week because we had the same problem last week, but we started to talk about the space between and what that actually means, and the work of Martin Buber. And where that comes from and how we meet in that space between. And we're doing that now with Bob. And part of what we spoke about last time was to continue on with the richness of our conversation together. And yeah, and the only thought I really had, Bob, over the last fortnight, for those who joining in, we meet fortnightly. I was thinking of the whole concept of turning, that Buber's concept of turning towards the other, and being more present for each other. And I think even within the Sufi tradition, they talk about the turning of the heart. And so I've been reflecting on that, not getting too far with that, but I just thought that might be a good place to jump into today. Yeah.
You make me think of something I've read in the last few weeks, but thank you for the introduction, Ian. Much appreciated. It's absolutely mutual. I've read, and I can't remember, I read so many different things going on at the same time, but the idea that came through was that one of the ways that we can show that we value love most of all is by paying simple attention. And there's a way that probably seems obvious or maybe even like a platitude, but I was struck by the profundity of that when I stop to pay attention to you and you me, that call it care, call it compassion, call it love, the words don't matter so much, but that it's a moral choice. And this person was talking about the morality of paying attention, that there really is a morality. And I don't think I'd ever quite appreciated that, to be honest with you, Ian. Makes me think if you're introducing Martin Buber or talking about different traditions like the Sufi tradition, I think most any tradition, wisdom tradition probably has some instance of that, but I think I missed school the day that they emphasized how important attention is. Even right now, saying it to you, what occurs to me is that there's so much of a literature around attention deficit disorder. And I sometimes have told students and even clients of mine, I'm so old, they didn't even have that diagnosis when I was a kid growing up, but I'm quite sure I would have merited it because I was quite an active little boy. I've been quite an active older man, but I don't know that I've ever thought of attention deficit disorder in terms of the relational dimension of it, much less the moral dimension of it. That if I've got an attention deficit, that I really want help because I want to show up in the world and pay attention to you. And if I have a difficult time doing that, I'd like to find some way to manage it.
Yeah. And I think for a couple of things I was thinking about then, Bob, as you're talking, one, and I'll be open and honest, I got this scripted part that I thought, oh, it'd be good to have a conversation about that with Bob. But that, so there's a scripted part that's running within me, but picking up with what you're just saying there and being more organic and authentic, is there something about that whole mindfulness process? So I've been diagnosed with a whole lot of years ago with adult ADD, and part of what I've been trying to do is watch myself move away I split off in conversations. Yeah, I'm not present sometimes. I'm not fully there. And if things don't interest me, I become quite bored easily, and I just drift away. All those things I talk about, I can relate to that. But I come back to meditation for me around the meditation, the mindfulness of, oh, look, there I am drifting away from Bob's conversation. And I come back. Oh, there I go again. And it's hard work. But the more I can concentrate and come back to the person in front of me talking, or the person I'm attempting to connect with, the easier the practice. When I came into recovery, I call it scrambled eggs. My head was just scrambled. I had no way of paying attention. I was just all over the shop, and I set off on this journey of recovery, and it was brought to my attention, talking about attention, it was brought to my attention way into that. I thought, oh, well, I'll finish my academic career and I'll go and do a PhD down at one of the country universities and down in Armidale, and my supervisor from the States said, Ian, I think you need to go and get yourself tested for ADD. And I did, and the diagnosis came back, and I'm glad of that, because I've been able to focus on that, because as part of the recovery process, it's just another place where I set myself up to fail. But if I have the awareness that that's where I'm at, I can sit here openly and talk about that from a position of, well, this is who I am. I'm not paying attention to you. I'm splitting off. I'm rolling away, and I need to come back, or whatever that is. Yeah.
I thank you, first of all, for your vulnerability. I want to join you and match you in that always in our conversations. I have so much respect for our relationship this way, because we've always kept it real with one another. And I really appreciate that. Thank you. It's a gift to me, Ian. Thank you for that. One of the things that you and I do with each other, you just did it now with me, and I presume you do this with your clients. I will guarantee you I do it with mine. And in any valued relationship, and all of my relationships with clients are valued relationships, is that as my mind skitters away, as soon as I become conscious, I'll stop and I'll talk about it clinically, because it'll happen however many times this week. I'll say, Ian, could you go back 2 sentences? You said something and I went someplace with it and I want to get back to it. I don't think I've ever had a client go, well, wow, do I ever feel disrespected by you? They appreciate that, and they're glad to roll it back and then back on track. There's something about, and you did it right now with me, there's something about admitting that we got distracted that itself is a moment of intimacy. There's a bridge in that moment. It's like, I care enough about what you're saying. I don't want to miss, and I'll say that, I don't want to miss anything. And I just missed the last paragraph. Can we roll it back? And then I work extra hard not to miss it a second time.
And that's what we discussed a little bit last week. I think there's and it is, Bob, and thank you, about, I just say, I missed that part. Can you just give me that again? Can we just step back? Yeah. And in my early recovery days, sitting in 12-step meetings down where I recovered, or got into recovery, into the 12-step programs, there used to be a picture sitting on the front desk, where the chairman sat. And it used to be the first 3 members. This is the scripted part now. It used to be the first, it's the first 3 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. The founders went into the hospital and sat on the hospital bed and had a dialogue, and they were present for another person. Yeah. And I used to imagine that the importance of that, not knowing anything about psychotherapy, not knowing anything about the journey of Buber, but just the importance of just human beings sitting down with each other and paying attention to each other and sharing their story, strength, and hope. That's a AA saying that, sharing our strength and hope with each other. And it's through that connection that people can be held or supported into the recovery process. And then how do we hold in that process? Yeah.
I'll tell you what comes to mind as I listen to you, appreciating very much what you're talking about. I started a new book today, and it's a book on the science of psychology. It's very much an emphasis on how personality theory has been studied over the last 2 or 3 centuries. And this author is taking a very scientific perspective in terms of what you can measure. And that was the psychology I was trained in for the most part. It wasn't exclusively that. But it makes me think of the American philosopher that you and I both have learned so much from, Ken Wilber. He says, you know, if you're measuring a rock, if you're a geologist, you can measure how much it weighs and its composition. You can do all of that from the outside, so to speak. You can do it objectively. But if you want to measure a human being, you're entering into what he calls phenomenology. You're entering into the interior world. And he says, geology is monologic science. A monologue is fine. You don't have to have a conversation with a rock. Studying a human being is dialogical, and it's now we're back to Buber again. There's no way that Bill W. and Dr. Bob and all the early pioneers in AA were applying some kind of cookie cutter. If they were, then it would just be monologic. Come in, apply the cookie cutter, send the person away, and they're going to get all better. But from the very beginning, they embraced and valued dialogue, which you do. You model it for everybody, including me. And the only psychology I'm interested in is a psychology of dialogue, because that's the only way we're going to get inside somebody's experience. And I don't think that you can change from the outside. We sometimes talk about top-down change. I don't think that change from the top down is lasting. I think we can change our minds temporarily, but if you want to change somebody, you have to change them from the bottom up. I think you have to change them from the heart, and that requires dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. And also in what we're doing here together, it's that co-created space between.
Yes.
Like I come up and then out. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Towards you. Yeah.
There's nothing, you know, you talked about scripted, and you shared a story that you might have thought of sharing today. I, for one, am glad you did. So much of what we say is spontaneous in the moment. You come up from inside of yourself, you bring something to me. It's that, like that association to Ken Wilber right now, or the book I'm reading this morning. None of that I thought that I'd be talking about today. I'm hoping that some of it's pertinent, maybe not all of it, but it's all spontaneous. That's for dadgum sure. And so I like your term. We are co-creating in real time. And that's what's been so beautiful about our relationship these last 10 years to me, is what we co-create. There's a sense of being surprised, just always a sense of being surprised by what comes up.
Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Yes. Been
What am I?
willing to...
You go ahead, please. Go ahead.
No, I drifted away actually. I just...
One of my favorite psychologists, or he was a psychiatrist, James Masterson. He was a psychoanalyst at the Menninger Clinic in Kansas here in the U.S. And he talked about the real self. He said, what are some characteristics? He named 3. He talked about clinically, when he sees a client engaging in one of these 3 or all 3 of them, whatever, that they represent, that they're tapping into something about who they really are. One of them was spontaneity, which is often it's manifest in terms of humor. And you and I have that. We just kind of spontaneously roll with things. He said another one is what he called autonomy, which is a respect for the individual's own experience and their voice. And you have a high value for that in your life, in your work, and I felt you value me. You value my voice, and I certainly value yours. It's the third one that comes to mind, though. He says the third indirect indicator of somebody tapping into who they really are, he just called it creativity. He said it's to be able to create, to be able to move into that space. That means that you've been able to let down your barriers to what's new and bring things together in new ways. You and I do that in spades.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The language I like around what you're just saying too, Bob, was that, and excuse me for not knowing the surname, but that work, well, those workshops I did a while ago with Bonnie.
Badenoch. That's fine. That's Bonnie Badenoch. Yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And the simplicity of what she was talking about through the left and right brain, and the left, just my take on it, and it's very Burbian in its simplicity. Left brain's about understanding, measuring, and doing that whole scientific thing with the left brain. Whoop, left brain.
Yeah.
And the creativity you're talking about is being able to slip into the right brain and allowing myself to be more spontaneous, authentic, yeah, creative, yeah, and just allowing myself to take a risk. And I feel safe. Our relationships a while, I noticed I hesitated a moment ago going, no, I'm not ready. Yeah. But that was, I could feel the embarrassment coming up because what I felt I was going to say, and I can't remember what it is right now, but what I felt I was going to say felt a little bit immature. And I go, I don't want to be that person. Yeah. So I still have the ability to censor or cut myself off from you. Yeah. And that in itself is an awareness within our interaction, within our relationship.
Yeah. I will sometimes feel it with you or with other close friends. I'll say, I'm even embarrassed to say this to you. And there's, I don't even ascribe that to you. It's my inner process. Just, I love how you're so attuned that you caught that and that you're modeling right now. Whether it's you telling me that or me telling you that, there are times that I'm going to see my therapist tomorrow morning, and I'll tell Dawn, I'll say, gosh, I feel shame even bringing this to you. And Dawn knows me inside and out at this point in all of our work. And I still feel it. It's like that dance between being present, like you were talking about, and then wanting to remove myself or distract myself, or maybe make myself look prettier than I am, smarter than I am, whatever. And I feel embarrassed that I do that with friends like you or with Dawn. It's like but it's that deep inside. I think the thing that you're modeling is at least naming it helps to take some of the oomph out of it. It does for me. If I tell you that I'm ashamed, or I tell you I'm afraid, or I tell you I forgot what I was thinking of, or whatever, then I get a chance to have you be who you are, which is incredibly understanding and compassionate.
Yeah. And then what comes up for me, Bob, and I agree with you that we banter this word around recovery. Yeah. And what we're talking about now for me, you have what they call early recovery, stage 2 recovery, or emotional recovery. Yeah. This part of it for me is the recovery process. I'm recovering those parts of myself. And I need to be able to take that risk with someone that I feel safe with, that I trust, yeah, that I have a good connection with and a history with, to say, man, this is me at my fucking worst.
Yeah, yeah.
And then to hear from the other side going, man, that's okay. I'll do that as well. Yeah. Oh, do you really, Bob?
Yeah.
And then we can connect around that. Or else I just spend that time in the shadows of who I am. I spend that time in hiding. I'd like to come out and tell you about this, whatever that is. Yeah. But I'm too ashamed. I'm too scared. Yeah. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be punished, whatever the internal dialogue is. And part of the joy of this work for me is to be able to tell you about my internal dialogue.
I love
Yeah.
what you just said, and I'd like to leave that as the climax of our conversation. It's the
Yeah.
opposite of taking the wind out of the sails. I want to put more wind into it. That vulnerability that you're talking about, and I love the way you tied it into recovery. I don't know how else I can recover the lost parts of myself except in the context of relationships like ours, Ian, honestly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that you just nailed it to me, the value of dialogue into those dark places, into the places that get exiled, and where we begin to reclaim those. And I've experienced that's been the highest value for me in the 12-step program, was having to practice that. And then beyond that is relationships like ours, where I can tell you I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, I'm scared, whatever, and bring that to you. This is how fucked up I am, and have you respond with loving kindness. I mean, it's just an incredible grace. That's what heals.
And
That's what
that, for me, that's the strength. That's the strength of
yeah,
the 12-step programs.
yeah.
By default, and probably by design as well, that's a continuous process within the fellowship
Yeah,
of the 12-step programs. In your case, the other recovery programs.
yeah.
As I say, and we can finish with this. It's just one addict, one alcoholic, seeing and listening and understanding another.